In 1975, a Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson built the world's first digital camera. It weighed 8 pounds, recorded images onto a cassette tape, and took 23 seconds to capture a single black and white photograph. Kodak executives looked at the prototype and decided to bury it. They did not patent it aggressively. They did not commercialize it. They actively discouraged further development. Kodak made its money selling film, and a digital camera that required no film was a direct threat to the business model that had made Kodak the most dominant photography company in the world. 37 years later, in 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. The company that had invented digital photography, that had seen the future first, had been destroyed by the very technology it created. This is the story of how success can blind you to the thing that will replace you. If you're interested in how dominant companies destroy themselves by refusing to adapt, subscribe to SnapOldBusiness. We cover the real stories behind legendary companies. Subscribe now and let's get into how Kodak had everything and lost it all. Kodak was founded in 1888 by George Eastman. Before Kodak, photography required heavy equipment, glass plates, and specialized knowledge. Eastman made photography accessible to regular people by inventing roll film and marketing cameras anyone could use. The company's slogan was, "You press the button, we do the rest." Customers bought a Kodak camera loaded with film, took their pictures, then sent the entire camera back to Kodak. The company developed the film, printed the photos, reloaded the camera with fresh film, and sent it all back. This model made Kodak phenomenally successful. By the 1970s, Kodak controlled 90% of film sales in the United States and 85% of camera sales. The company employed over 60,000 people in Rochester, New York alone. It was one of the most profitable companies in America. Kodak's business model was brilliant and durable. Cameras were sold cheaply. Film was sold at high margins. Every photograph required film, and every roll of film required development. Kodak made money 3 times: on the camera, on the film, and on the processing. It was a perfect loop. In 1975, Steve Sasson was a young electrical engineer working in Kodak's research lab. His supervisor gave him a straightforward assignment: figure out if you can build a camera using the new CCD image sensors instead of film. Nobody expected it to actually work. Sasson spent a year building a prototype. The result was massive, awkward, and slow, but it worked. The camera captured an image digitally, stored it on a cassette tape, and could display the image on a television screen. It was the world's first digital camera. Sasson demonstrated the camera to Kodak executives. They watched him capture an image, wait 23 seconds for it to record, then play it back on a TV. Their reaction was not enthusiasm. One executive asked why anyone would ever want to look at their pictures on a television set. The executives understood immediately what digital photography meant for Kodak's business. No film, no processing, no darkroom chemicals. The entire profit structure of the company eliminated. Digital photography was an existential threat, and Kodak had just invented it. Kodak made a decision. The technology was real, but it was not ready for consumers yet. The images were low quality. The equipment was expensive. The film was still vastly superior for most uses. The smart move was to keep developing digital technology slowly while protecting the film business. This decision made sense in 1975. Film was better. Digital cameras were impractical. The market was not ready. Kodak was not wrong about any of these facts. What Kodak was wrong about was assuming they would stay true forever. Kodak continued to research digital imaging through the 1980s and 1990s. The company filed hundreds of patents, built prototypes, but it never fully committed to commercializing digital photography because doing so would have meant cannibalizing its own film sales. Meanwhile, competitors who had no film business to protect saw digital photography as pure opportunity. Sony released the Mavica in 1981. Canon and Nikon followed with their own digital cameras in the 1990s. These companies were not held back by protecting old revenue streams. Kodak did eventually release digital cameras. The company launched its first consumer digital camera in 1994, but Kodak's strategy was confused. It wanted to sell digital cameras while also protecting film sales. That is not a strategy. That is a contradiction. In 1999, Kodak's revenue was $14 billion. Film sales were still strong. Digital cameras were growing but remained a small part of the business. The company believed it had time to manage the transition from film to digital gradually, on its own terms, but digital camera technology improved faster than Kodak anticipated. Image quality got better, prices dropped, consumers started switching from film to digital rapidly, and then smartphones arrived with built-in cameras, eliminating the need for a separate camera entirely. Kodak's film sales collapsed. Between 2000 and 2010, the company's revenue fell from $14 billion to $7 billion. Massive layoffs followed. Plants closed. The stock price, which had been over $90 in 1997, fell below $1 by 2011. Kodak tried to pivot. The company invested heavily in digital printing and commercial imaging. It acquired companies in adjacent markets. But none of these moves generated the kind of profits that film had produced. The new businesses could not replace what was lost. On January 19, 2012, Kodak filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that had defined photography for over a century, that had invented the very technology that replaced it, could not survive the transition. The bankruptcy was not sudden. It was the end of a decline that had been visible for over a decade. During the bankruptcy process, Kodak sold off its vast patent portfolio, including many digital imaging patents, for about $500 million. The patents that could have made Kodak the dominant player in digital photography instead became assets to liquidate. Kodak emerged from bankruptcy in 2013 as a much smaller company focused on commercial printing. Consumer photography, the business it had pioneered, was gone. The Kodak that exists today is a shadow of what it was. The name survives, but the dominance does not. Here is the thing about the Kodak collapse. It was not inevitable. Kodak had the technology first. It had the talent, the resources, and the brand recognition. What it did not have was the willingness to destroy its own profitable business before someone else did. This is called the innovator's dilemma. When you are the market leader, the rational thing to do is protect your existing business. Investing in a new technology that cannibalizes your current revenue stream looks reckless. But if you do not do it, someone else will. Kodak executives in the 1980s and 1990s were not stupid. They understood digital photography. They knew it was coming, but they also knew that shifting to digital would mean giving up billions in film revenue immediately, in exchange for uncertain future digital revenue. The decision to protect film sales was rational, quarter by quarter, year by year, but it was fatal strategically. Kodak chose short-term profitability over long-term survival. And honestly, given the incentive structures at the time, it is hard to see how they could have chosen differently. Kodak's leadership was rewarded for hitting quarterly earnings targets, not for making long-term bets that would hurt current profits. The stock market punished companies that sacrificed today for tomorrow. The entire system pushed Kodak toward protecting film even as digital was replacing it. The irony is brutal. Kodak invented digital photography and then spent decades trying to slow down the thing it created. Meanwhile, companies with nothing to lose embraced digital completely and took the market. Kodak protected its past and lost its future. There is another layer to the story. Kodak was not just selling film. It was employing tens of thousands of people in Rochester, New York. Shifting to digital meant laying off much of that workforce. The social cost of the transition was real and immediate. The executives making these decisions were not faceless villains. They were people trying to preserve jobs, maintain a company, and serve shareholders. The tragedy is that trying to preserve the old business meant losing everything. The Kodak story teaches that seeing the future is not enough. You have to be willing to act on what you see even when it means destroying what made you successful. That is extraordinarily difficult when you are winning. The companies that survive technological transitions are usually not the ones that invented the new technology. They are the ones willing to cannibalize themselves before someone else does. Netflix killed Blockbuster by mailing DVDs, then killed its own DVD business with streaming. Kodak was not killed by a lack of innovation. It was killed by an inability to abandon its old business model fast enough. The technology was irrelevant. The problem was organizational and psychological. Success creates inertia that is almost impossible to overcome. Every major company today faces some version of the Kodak problem. Your most successful product is eventually going to be replaced by something else. The question is whether you will be the one to replace it or whether you will try to protect it until someone else makes you irrelevant. Steve Sasson, the engineer who built the first digital camera, stayed at Kodak until 2009. He watched the company slowly decline for decades. In interviews, he has said that leadership knew what needed to happen but could not bring themselves to do it. The most painful part of the Kodak story is that it did not have to end this way. Kodak had every advantage: the technology, the brand, the talent, the market position. What it lacked was the courage to destroy its own business before the market did. In 1975, Kodak invented the future of photography. Then it spent the next 35 years trying to delay that future. In 2012, the future arrived anyway, and Kodak was not ready. The company that had defined photography for a century became a cautionary tale about the cost of protecting the past. Next up on SnapOldBusiness, why Nokia missed the smartphone revolution even though it had all the pieces. That video is on screen now. Subscribe if this was worth your time. See you in the next one.